Hey guys, Mama Sam here. So today I'm making a video that I'm like super excited to make. I'm going to be doing my top 5, I guess favorite, I don't know, but top 5 to me personally, most interesting alien encounters, whether documented or caught on video. Now, I love to talk about all things creepy and weird and scary, and you probably wouldn't really know it by some of the videos I've made, which I'm pretty interested in things like the paranormal, like ghosts and demons and stuff. My candle is tripping out right now. I'm interested in that, but my passion really lies with aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrials, any of that kind of stuff. Like, that is what I truly get really, really excited to talk about. If I had to like pick what to do, like whether, paranormal investigator or whatever, I'd rather be like a sky watcher, like a ufologist, like all that kind of stuff. To me, that's really interesting. I'm really interested in the other stuff too, but that one I'm more interested in. So I'm really excited to do today's video. Also, please don't forget to send your stories to shareitwithmamasam@gmail.com. You know the kind of stories I'm wanting. So if you have your own personal encounter or experiences or anything, my hair looks crazy today, or anything with like your chronic illnesses, all that, please send it in and I will be so excited to read them on here and discuss. So again, these are all my personal alien encounters that I think are the most interesting. Now I'm only doing 5. There's so many out there. I left off Roswell because I feel like everybody knows that one. I left off the Betty and I don't remember the name of them, but the lady whose dress had that like weird stuff on it that didn't come from Earth. Also very credible. Betty and Barney, I think their names were. I left them off just because it just barely didn't make it to the list for the things that I think are interesting. But if there are things that I left off or other things that you would like to comment below that like maybe I don't know about, I'm always excited to learn more about any type of alien encounters. So also, please forgive all the noise outside. It's super, super windy here. Like, it's been like insane wind for like the last week or something. I don't know. It's crazy. So those are all the trees that like we never trim slamming against the house. So for number 5, I have the Falcon Lake incident. Stan McCallick can still vividly remember when his dad came home sick and injured after something happened in the Falcon Lake woods in Manitoba on the May long weekend of 1967. It was something that put his family's life into upheaval and remains one of the world's best known UFO encounters. I recalled seeing him in bed. He didn't look good at all. He looked pale and haggard. So Stan was only 9 years old at the time that this happened. Stan recalls, "When I walked into the bedroom, there was a huge stink in the room, like a real horrible aroma. It was all around and it was coming out of his pores." Ooh. The story about his dad being burned by a UFO ran in the Winnipeg Tribune newspaper, and that's when everything pretty much hit the fan, Stan recalls. Stefan was an industrial mechanic by trade and an amateur geologist who liked to venture into the wilderness around Falcon Lake. On May 20th, 1967, Stefan was near a vein of quartz along the Precambrian Shield in the area when the 51-year-old was startled by a gaggle of nearby geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. Stefan looked up and saw 2 cigar-shaped objects with a reddish glow hovering about 45 meters away. One descended, landing on a flat section of rock and taking on more of a I'm sorry, that was not on purpose. Taking more of a disc shape. The other remained in the air for a few minutes before flying off. Believing it to be a secret U.S. military experimental craft, Stefan sat back and sketched it over the next half hour. Then he decided to approach, later recalling the warm air and smell of sulfur as he got closer, as well as a whirring sound of motors and a hissing of air. This guy's pretty brave to like hang out and sketch it. I don't know if I would have had that much like wits about me. I usually don't have much wits about me anyway, so He also noted a door open on the side with bright lights inside and said he heard voices muffled by the sounds from the craft. He went closer and noted the smooth metal of the ship with no seams. He then looked into the bright doorway, pulling on the welding goggles he used to protect his eyes while chipping at rocks during prospecting. Inside, Stefan said he saw light beams and panels of various colored flashing lights, but could not see anyone or any living thing. When he stepped away, 3 panels slid across the door opening and sealed it. He reached to touch the craft, which he said melted the fingertips of the glove he was wearing. The craft then began to turn counterclockwise, and Stefan says he noticed a panel that contained a grid of holes. Shortly afterward, he was struck in the chest by a blast of air or gas that pushed him backward and set his shirt and cap ablaze. He ripped away the burning garments as the craft lifted off and flew away. Disoriented and nauseous, Stefan stumbled through the forest and vomited. He eventually made his way back to his motel room in Falcon Lake, then caught a bus back to Winnipeg. He was treated at a hospital for burns to his chest and stomach that later turned into raised sores on a grid-like pattern. And for weeks afterward, he suffered from diarrhea, headaches, blackouts, and weight loss. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the story that happened there. Following that, reporters and stuff started to follow his son to school, asking him questions. Their house was getting bombarded. And when he was 83 on his deathbed in 1999, he claimed the whole thing was true and said he wished he would have never told anyone because it basically ruined his whole life. So I always found that one really, really interesting because it's not like your typical story of like a UFO encounter where this guy was trying to like make it really public. The only reason it went public was because he was in the hospital and people were asking like what happened. He's like, well, and so it got more public. And plus the pictures just of the burn marks on his stomach. Something about this one just always stuck with me. It just seemed very credible to me. So for number 4, I have the extraordinary flight of JAL 1628, Alaska's best known UFO encounter. Kenju Tadauchi was an ex-fighter pilot and senior airline pilot with more than 10,000 hours flight experience. He was actually flying cargo from Paris to Reykjavik, and then he was going on to Tokyo. So Captain Tadachi, sitting on the left side of the cockpit, saw unidentified lights out his side window to the left and below. He thought they were military planes and ignored them. After a few minutes, he realized that these unidentified craft were pacing him. Flight 1628 contacted the Anchorage Center twice in rapid succession and asked if there were any other aircraft in the area. The Anchorage Center responded that there were no military aircraft, and ground radar did not show any aircraft other than Flight 1628. Tadachi recollected in his official report to the FAA, the distance from the lights was far enough from us and we felt no immediate danger. I thought perhaps it is a UFO. The lights were still moving strangely. Most unexpectedly, 2 spaceships appeared directly in front of the plane, shooting off lights. The inside cockpit shined brightly and I felt the warmth of the UFO thrusters on my face. Then, 3 to 7 seconds later, the fire, like from jet engines, stopped and became a small circle of lights as they began to fly in level flight at the same speed as we were. The middle of the body of the ship sparked an occasional stream of lights, like a charcoal fire. Its shape was a square, flying 500 feet to 1,000 feet in front of us, very slightly higher in altitude than us. Its size was about the same size as the body of a DC-8, which is a similar size to a Boeing 707. It is impossible for any man-made machine to make a sudden appearance in front of a jumbo jet that is flying 910 kilometers per hour and to move along in a formation paralleling our aircraft. But we did not feel threatened or in danger. Honestly, we were simply astounded. I have no idea why they came so close to us. There was a pale white flat light in the direction where the ships flew away. The Anchorage Center replied that they saw nothing on the radar. I set our digital weather radar distance to 20 miles, radar angle to horizon. There it was on the screen. A large, green, round object had appeared 7 or 8 miles away. It was a clear night. We were just above the bright city lights, and we checked the pale white light behind us. There was a silhouette of a gigantic spaceship. A terrified Captain Tadachi, in coordination with the Anchorage Center, attempted evasive maneuvers, such as flying in a circle and changing altitude. About that time, a United Airlines passenger jet flew into the same air zone and was requested by the ATC to get a visual on the situation, Tadachi reported. When the United plane came by our side, the spaceship suddenly disappeared. The strange encounter ended 150 miles away from Anchorage. So somebody got involved to investigate what exactly happened. So the investigator played a tape of the ATC radar sightings on a scope. Anchorage Air Traffic Control didn't see the UFOs on their radar, but based on their conversation, the military were clearly tracking the UFOs. Callahan explained, the military controller has what they call height-finding radar, and they have long-range radar and short-range radar. So if they don't catch it on one of their systems, they catch it on the other. Details reported by the military controller indicated that the UFOs were traveling thousands of miles per hour as they maneuvered in the airspace around the 747. The military controller had one other surprise finding. Near the end of the incident, a United Airlines flight was diverted to observe the JLA flight. By then, Captain Terachi no longer saw the huge UFO, and the United pilot did not see it either. Unbeknownst to both of them, the military radar clearly indicated that the UFO had tucked in out of sight behind the United flight and had begun following it. After sitting through the presentation, Callahan's boss, Callahan is the detective, turned to him and said, "Don't talk to anybody until I give you the okay." The next day, his boss set up a briefing. According to Callahan, I brought all of the people from the tech center. We went upstairs. We had all kinds of boxes of data that we handed them, printouts. It filled up the room. They brought in 3 people from the FBI, 3 people from the CIA, and 3 people from Reagan's scientific study team. And I don't know who the rest of the people were, but they were all excited. When they got done, they swore all these guys into this never took place. We had this meeting, and this was never recorded. This was one of the guys from the CIA. I asked them at the time, I don't know why you're saying this. I mean, if there was something there, and if it's not the then in development stealth bomber, then you know it's a UFO. And if it's a UFO, why wouldn't you want the people to know? He said if they come out and told the American public that they ran into a UFO out there, it would cause panic across the country. So therefore, we can't talk about it. So what happened to Captain Terachi? He was banished to a desk job because you can't have some guy talking about UFOs. I mean, you just can't, right? Like, even though there's all this evidence of it, you can't. So they had said that he brought embarrassment to the airline and to the airline industry in general. He was, however, reinstated a few years later. So that is some good news. This one to me just is very, very credible. I mean, you have so much to it that just seems like it had to have happened. Like, and some of the pictures he drew for like what he saw, they're unbelievable. Like, man, I wish I would have been there so I could have seen it. It would have been so cool. So for number 3, I have a story of a family that was just completely basically ridiculed. Everybody said they were lying. These people had no reason to lie. They were very open about all of it. They didn't want any money or anything from it. And that is the infamous Kelly Hopkinsville alien incident. I've mentioned this before in one of my other videos. This is one that has stuck with me near and dear. What happened out there? What happened? It's such a crazy story. On the evening of Sunday, August 21st, 1955, Lucky Sutton, a man in his early 20s, was visiting his mom, Glennie Langford, and 3 younger half-siblings at the farmhouse he'd grown up in 8 miles north of Hopkinsville. Lucky and his wife Vera and their friends Billy Ray and June Taylor were staying for the weekend. His brother JC and sister-in-law Aline, plus a family friend OP, were also there that night. Following a hearty supper prepared by Miss Glennie, the party of 11 had settled in for a card game when Billy Ray made an outlandish claim. Walking back into the house from a trip to the well to refill his water glass, he blurted out that he'd just seen a round metallic object with rainbow-colored streaks trailing behind it, moving through the sky above the farm. His companions took it as a prank at first, writing it off as another one of tricks Billy Ray and Lucky liked to play on each other. But Billy Ray seemed genuinely bothered by whatever he'd seen, despite the others' insistence that it was probably a meteor or a shooting star. Billy Ray got Lucky to walk out to the well with him so he could point out exactly where the object had gone across the sky. Lucky didn't know what to make of his friend's story, but it was clear something had scared him. They were headed back to resume their game when something stopped them in their tracks. A glowing object, approaching from the woods behind the house. As it got closer, they realized it was a short, human-like creature with large eyes, 2 legs that seemed to float rather than walk, and 2 arms raised as if in surrender. The 2 men ran inside, slamming the door behind them. Around the same time, a neighbor about a quarter-mile north of them noticed lights in the woods behind the Sutton farm and figured the family was searching for one of their pigs that had gotten out. Later, when he heard gunshots, he imagined they were dealing with a bobcat preying on their livestock. Glennie didn't understand what the commotion was about. She lived on the property for decades and never experienced anything even remotely strange, and she didn't want Lucky's talk of otherworldly goblins upsetting his younger siblings, so she sent them to bed. The next thing she knew, the guys were standing guard at the doors. Lucky at the front with a 12 gauge and Billy Ray at the back with a 22. After putting the children down, Glennie and Billy Ray were sitting silently, waiting, while everyone else except Lucky and the children talked in the living room. When a figure about 3 feet tall appeared in the doorway out of the darkness, Glennie screamed and everyone came running. Billy Ray shot at the would-be intruder, piercing a hole in the screen door. Spurred by curiosity, he stepped onto the porch. As he did, he says a clawed hand reached down from the roof, grazing his hair. Elaine grabbed Billy Ray and yanked him back inside the house. Lucky stepped outside, aiming his gun at the roof. The creature he shot rolled off the roof and disappeared into the woods, apparently uninjured. In the living room, a pair of glowing eyes appeared at the window. JC shot at it through the glass with a 20-gauge shotgun. Close behind, Billy Ray followed up with a bullet. The struck creature flipped back and took off running. The gunfire had stirred the youngest kids from their sleep, and Lenny went to reassure the children. Lucky urged the woman to take the children into the back room and hide. Lucky and Billy Ray surveyed the front yard while JC, OP, and Glennie waited inside. Someone yelled to look up in the maple tree. This time everyone could clearly see one of the little men perched on a branch above them. They shot at the bean, but instead of falling, it floated off. The noise they heard when they fired at another one coming around the corner sounded like bullets hitting metal. Realizing their gunfire was useless, the men retreated. They turned on every light in the house and waited. Outside it was eerily silent. One of the children began to cry. Lucky was trying to think of what to do next when they heard scratching coming from the roof. He darted outside, pointed his gun at the top of the house, and fired at the creature there. The bean floated down and scrambled out of sight beyond the trees, seemingly unharmed like the others. They figured it was time to get out of there. When the coast was clear, everyone made a break for the trucks, piling in as fast as they could. The sergeant working the front desk at the Hopkinsville police station didn't know what to say to the 11 people who'd come in before midnight. One of them said they'd been fighting little silver men for hours. The officer may not have believed that, but it was obvious something had frightened them. Why else would they have children out so late? The officer phoned Chief Russell Greenwell, who in turn radioed Kentucky State Police, the Christian County Sheriff's Office, and Fort Campbell Army Base, which dispatched its own police personnel. Within an hour, at least a half-dozen law enforcement and media members had converged on the Sutton farm along with the returning family. Authorities searched the property with flashlights but found no sign of the intruders. Only holes in the window screens and plenty of shotgun shell casings. One officer noticed something glowing in the woods, but a search returned nothing. The ground beneath where Lucky had shot one of the alleged beans appeared to have been stained with something that gave off an iridescent sheen when viewed from an angle. Officers questioned the family members separately, but all they got was the same consistent description of the night's events. After hours of fruitless investigation, the police left. At 3:30 in the morning, after a fitful nap that never entered deep sleep, Glennie awoke to the sight of one of the little men on the other side of her bedroom window. She called out to Lucky, who was asleep on the couch in the living room. He and Billy Ray spent the next couple of hours watching guard with their guns. The creatures left just before daybreak, they say, the last the family would ever see of them. So after this encounter, much like the story we had at number 5, the Sutton family started to get harassed by people wanting to hear more of the story, the media, all that kind of stuff. They never wanted to talk about it because they assumed everybody would think that they were crazy. They still, to this day, say that this is exactly what happened. They never wanted anything. People wanted to write books about it and stuff, which, I mean, they did, but they didn't want anything to do with any of that. In fact, at one point, the family, they started getting harassed from people when the story started to come out, saying that they wanted to get information, write books, all this kind of stuff. The family got tired of it and they upped and moved after just 10 days of being messed with by these people. The mom, who was elderly now, she had to give up her home and move to an apartment somewhere else where nobody knew where she lived. So these people didn't want anything from it. They were scared. Something scared them enough to where they were shooting off all kinds of guns with children around. Obviously they felt like they were being attacked and had to protect their family. So yeah, this one, it really sticks with me because what could it have been? So for number 2, it's really well known, but it is the Travis Walton alien abduction case. Probably, arguably the most well-documented and credible alien abduction stories of all time. They even made a movie out of it, Fire in the Sky. The Travis Walton UFO incident was an alien abduction of American forestry worker Travis Walton by a UFO on November 5th, 1975. While he was working near Snowflake, Arizona, Walton went missing for 5 days and 6 hours. After days of searching with scent dogs and helicopters, Walton says he reappeared by the side of the road near Herbert, Arizona. So what happened was they were working out in the forest, and after they were done, I think they were logging. Yeah, they worked for a logging crew. After they were done, they packed up and they started driving home. And as they were driving home, they see this huge light in the forest, and it's kind of low and it's kind of red, and they're like, "What is that?" And one of the guys is like, "Well, maybe that's the moon." And somebody else in the car was like, "No, the moon is on the other side." So they're looking, and then they get worried. They're like, "What if this is a forest fire? Maybe we should go check it out, see what's going on, see if they need help." So they went to check out, the forest fire, and turned out that they saw an alien craft in the sky. It says they encountered a saucer-shaped object hovering over the ground approximately 110 feet away from where they were parked at, making a high-pitched buzz. Walton left the truck and approached the object. A beam of light suddenly appeared from the craft and knocked him unconscious. The other 6 men were frightened and drove away. When Walton awoke, he awoke in a hospital-like room, being observed by 3 short, bald creatures. He fought them off until a human wearing a helmet led Walton to another room where he blacked out as 3 other humans put a clear mask over his face. Walton says he remembers nothing else until he was found walking himself along the highway 5 days later. In the days following Walton's UFO claim, the National Enquirer awarded Walton and his co-workers a $5,000 prize after they were said to have passed polygraph tests. So for 5 days, the authorities thought he'd been murdered by his co-workers, and then he had returned home. So all of the co-workers that were in the truck with him and Travis Walton himself, they all took polygraph tests and they all passed. And then years later, they did it all again and they all still passed. So it is considered one of the most credible cases of alien abduction out there. If you want to know more about it, just look up the Travis Walton story. There's a lot of information you can get online to read it, making your own conclusions. You can watch Fire in the Sky. You can read his book. I believe him. I do. I believe him. There's just too much to this that's credible. Like the sheriff's department, they all got involved. Like this was a huge deal, like a huge case. It seems like it really kind of stuck with Travis. You can see him in interviews later. I think Joe Rogan did an interview, and his story has never changed. And they all still pass the polygraphs whenever they're asked to take them. And for number one, this one's probably a little bit more personal because I was actually alive when this happened, and I actually saw it on TV when it happened, and that is the Phoenix Lights. To me, this is like the freaking creme de la creme of like UFO sightings, alien sightings. It's almost like this was supposed to be like a first contact type of thing. I mean, the scale of this thing is so grand. It really does remind me of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was huge. So, you know the picture, you know the video, but let's actually read and talk about and hear the information about the whole encounter from beginning to end. At about 6:55 p.m., a man reported seeing a V-shaped object above Henderson, Nevada. Oh my gosh. Henderson is like a half hour away from here. Why couldn't I have been here at that time? It would have been so cool. He said it was about the size of a Boeing 747, sounded like rushing wind, and had 6 lights on its leading edge. A former police officer from Paulden, Arizona, is claimed to have been the next person to report the sighting. As he was driving north, he saw a cluster of reddish or orange lights in the sky, comprising 4 lights together and a 5th light trailing them. Each of the individual lights in the formation appeared to the witness to consist of 2 separate point sources of orange light. He returned home and watched the lights through binoculars until they disappeared south over the horizon. Lights were also reportedly seen in the areas of Prescott and Prescott Valley. Callers began reporting the object was definitely solid because it blocked out much of the sky as it passed over. Devin Lorenz and his aunt Jamie Lorenz were standing outside on his porch in Prescott Valley when they noticed a cluster of lights to the west/northwest of their position. The lights formed a triangular pattern, but all of them appeared to be red except the light at the nose of the object, which was distinctly white. So far we have, 4 different people who've said they have seen the exact same thing in 4 different areas. The lights disappeared in the night sky to the southeast of Prescott Valley. The information was actually reported to the National UFO Reporting Center. Tim Lay and his wife Bobby, his son Hal, and his grandson Damian Turnage first saw the lights when they were above Prescott Valley, about 65 miles away from them. At first, the lights appeared to them as 5 separate and distinct lights in an arc shape. They soon realized that the lights appeared to be moving towards them. Over the next 10 minutes or so, the lights appeared to come closer, the distance between the lights increased, and they took on the shape of an upside-down V. Eventually, when the lights appeared to be a couple of miles away, the witnesses could make out the shape of what looked like a 60-degree carpenter's square with the 5 lights set into it, with 1 at the front and 2 on each side. Soon the object with the embedded lights appeared to be coming right down the street where they lived, about 100 to 150 feet above them, traveling so slowly that it appeared to hover and was silent. The object then passed over their heads and headed towards Squawk Peak Mountain, toward the direction of Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Witnesses in Glendale, a suburb northwest of Phoenix, saw the object pass overhead at an altitude high enough to become obscured by the thin clouds. When the triangular formation entered the Phoenix area, Bill Grainer, a cement driver hauling a load down a mountain north of Phoenix, said when he saw the lights, "I'll never be the same. Before this, if anybody had told me they saw a UFO, I would have said, yeah, right, and I believe the Tooth Fairy. Now I've got a whole new view, and I may be just a dumb truck driver, but I've seen something that didn't belong here." Grainer stated that the lights hovered over the area for more than 2 hours. And that is the footage that we are most familiar with, is when it stopped above Phoenix and just stood there with the lights coming on and off. A report came from a young man in the Kingman area who stopped his car at a payphone to report the incident. The young man en route to Los Angeles called from a phone booth to report having seen a large and bizarre cluster of stars moving slowly in the northern sky. And that is everything about the Phoenix Lights. There is tons of witnesses. We have actual footage of the Phoenix Lights. I remember seeing the news report when it came out and being blown away. I want to say this happened in 97. Was it 97? UFO Phoenix, March 13th, 1997. Yeah, I remember this. That one to me is the ultimate of all UFO videos and encounters, and it's just so amazing to watch. Like, I totally geek out every time I see that video. So it's so loud in here. So that's it. That's my top 5, for me personally, most memorable, exciting alien UFO encounters. If you have any stories, paranormal UFO encounters, please send them to sharewithmamasam@gmail.com. I would be more than happy to read them. In fact, I'd be very excited. You can send videos and pictures, and can you send that in an email? I don't really know, but if you can, please do. I'd love to share it. That is all I have for you today, guys. So until next time, question everything. Bye, friends.